Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today I am going to demonstrate how I make a flat knit blank on my loops and threads knitting machine. Now the first thing that you will need to do is flip the switch from tube to panel on your machine. When you're in panel mode and you're cranking, all of a sudden you'll feel the machine stop, and this is what will allow you, when you're going back and forth, to create your flat panel. The yarn I am using for this demonstration is Swiss worsted, and I already have it wound into a loose center pull ball so that way I can have very little tension as I am using the machine. Threading the machine to make a flat panel is very similar to the way that you would start off if you were going to be knitting a tube. But we are going to start until we hit our stop point, which you can see is marked with this black hook right here. And so now we are going to thread that hook, skip the next hook, and let this yarn catch on every other hook, placing the yarn behind as you slowly spin around the machine so we can catch every other hook, and this will prevent our flat panel from unraveling as we go. Okay, now I would be able to keep going a few stitches past this black hook, which is the center, but right now I am going to stop, and with this with a thread passed behind sort of this last hook, I'm going to place it through the thread inlet and put the yarn through the tension bar, and I'm now going to knit sort of as far as I can. So now I have hit the stop, and I'm going to turn around and go in the reverse section. And you can see on the reverse side we caught that hook that had otherwise been skipped on the previous round. And we will continue knitting, and then we hit our stop again. And so now we will turn around and go back in the previous direction. Okay, now as we come to the end, you'll notice that the yarn has come up and picked up this stitch. And then what we're looking for is for that hook to go down through that stitch below it. And once that has happened, then we can turn around, because we know that that hook will be able to catch the yarn to go back in the other direction. So once again, we're coming up on that last stitch, and the important thing, we've cut the yarn, we need it to go down through that stitch right here, and that's when we can turn around. So even though, you know, we just hit the catch, as soon as we see that go through, we know we're good. The other thing, you could watch for the yarn to catch underneath one of these bars, but if you just watch the stitch, you can make sure that you have a consistent end. And we'll watch for this on the other side as well. So I think it's about time for me to add clips to weigh this down. But when we're going in the reverse direction, keep an eye on this hook. You're going to wait for that hook to go through that stitch. And then even though once you've caught, then you can go back the other direction. And then you can go quickly until the other side. And again, wait for, that last hook to go down in the stitch, and then you can turn around. And that is what keeps you making sure that your fiber is attached and that you're not going to have sort of an uneven edge. So it's potentially possible to have fewer than 4 stitches free in between, but given that I am making these panels as a dyeing tool, I'm not too concerned. and it is past time for me to use these clips that came with the machine, so that way I can weigh down the edge. And this is only something that's really necessary until once the clips start to hit the table, then they can be removed. But this helps, I guess, pull the yarn down so that way you make sure that you are actually catching the stitches. So let's watch this from the upper angle. I'm going to go all the way around, and as we go past the edge, we want to make sure that this last hook not only catches the yarn, but pulls it through the bottom of the previous stitch. Because then you can see how even though those hooks had caught the yarn, as we go backwards, it gets released. And then on this side as well, we're now keeping an eye on this hook. You're waiting for it to catch the yarn and go through that stitch all the way. And that's how you know that when you go back, you will catch the yarn in the right place. So again, you know, if you start turning too soon and this hook has not gone down below that stitch, then it won't work. You'll start to lose that stitch and you could end up with a floppy stitch or an uneven edge, which when you're going to dye and unravel isn't a big deal necessarily, but I guess that's where you are watching for things to happen. So we went all the way down through that stitch. So as we approach this last stitch, we want to make sure that both that yarn goes down to the bottom. So we catch the yarn, see that little hook go down through the stitch, and once it's all the way down, then we know it is safe to turn around. And here we go on the other side. We're watching this hook this time. It's gone down below that stitch, and you can see that it picks a stitch up as we go back in the other direction. I sort of wish I picked a different yarn for the demo. But again, the last stitch in the row picks up the yarn, brings it down, and you can see it's gone all the way below that stitch, so that way when we come back around, it sort of picks up that stitch back, and it can therefore re-hook the yarn as we're going around. And on the other side, right here, wait for that to go below, and then as it comes back up, it lifts that stitch off and can re-catch the yarn, and we've got our nice little edge. And then once you get going, you can go pretty fast. It's actually pretty soothing and relaxing to do. But you'll end up with a nice flat panel. As you get going, you can make your own blanks, so then you can dye them in a number of different fun patterns to unravel them for some really, really unique yarns. I'm currently doing this with single-stranded worsted weight yarn. You could absolutely make flat and round blanks using double-stranded of fingering weight yarn, probably lace weight yarn, but I do not think that the machine would easily be able to handle a bulky weight or 2 strands of worsted weight yarn, and you would risk damaging the gears. But I do find making a flat panel significantly easier on this Loops and Threads machine than on, say, some of the Singer knitting machines and other knitting machines that I've used so far. And I do recommend continuing to add the clips up the side of the panel, but the other ones along the bottom you can remove once it's hitting the table. But I think that these side clips actually do help you make sure that you can not only catch the stitch, but that the yarn goes down so that way you can go through and make that stitch. Now we are approaching the end, and you can see that I still have the clips on either side because it helps make sure that the last stitch catches appropriately. And as I'm going back and forth, I make sure that those hooks go inside the stitch, and here we come to the end of our yarn. Now, when I do this on my Singer knitting machine, I always like to take the yarn and sort of weave it through the end of the stitches. However, on this machine, I've started leaving the last row raw. I find that it stays together pretty well through whatever dyeing technique I'm doing. So for this last little bit, I'm reversing direction, cranking until I run out of yarn, and then I'm going to the end, going back. So we kind of stopped in the middle of the row, and you can see that we are now popping. With the exception of these last few stitches, it sometimes can be a little stubborn. And so if needed, I will manually pop off those last few. And now here is the flat blank that we made on our Loops and Threads knitting machine. You can see that the gauge is pretty loose, but for a blank that we want to dye, that ends up being really nice because it helps the stitches take up color. If you want the gauge to be a little tighter, you could try increasing the tension by using putting the yarn through sort of more of these loops on the thread inlet. However, I find that an increased tension can lead to some problems sometimes on these machines. So I always like to use as little tension as possible. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I'm sorry it took me so long to finally get this tutorial out. But I hope that I have helped you feel a little more confident in making a flat blank on the Loops and Threads knitting machine. If you found this tutorial helpful, please give the video a like and subscribe to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. I release multiple new yarn dyeing videos every week, and I really like looking at innovative ways to apply color to yarn, and so you don't want to miss any videos. If you would like to support ChemKnits on a more personal level, check out our Patreon. You can find a link in the video description. Thank you so much for watching.